Horia Musadiq, a women's rights activist and former journalist from Afghanistan. Horia has many memories from the 1980s when Afghanistan descended into chaos. In 1993, a rocket hit her home and killed her brother. Horia was severely beaten by one of the Taliban's vice and virtue police officers simply for lifting her burqa to look at a piece of fabric. She fled to Pakistan in 1995, where she worked as a journalist for an international news agency. After the US-led invasion of Afghanistan in 2001 that toppled the Taliban, Horia returned to the country. She continued her work as a journalist, documenting human rights abuses. She also established the first war victims network in Afghanistan, giving survivors a chance to tell their stories in local media and organize demonstrations to call for truth and justice. Currently she is living abroad, continuing her work as an activist to tell the truth about current Afghanistan. She has spoken to the cover story highlighting the current situation in Afghanistan.
Hello, my name is Horia Musadiq and I'm a human rights defender, a woman human rights defender from Afghanistan. Since Taliban were brought to power by the United States in August 2021, as a result of an agreement signed with the United States in February 2020, Taliban have dissolved all the laws in Afghanistan, including Afghanistan Constitution, which was entitling both man and woman to equal rights, obligating education to boys and girls, and there were many rights to the Afghanistan citizens that have been dissolved. Taliban also dissolved other laws such as penal code, such as civil rights code, such as family law, and many other laws that have been dissolved. And since Taliban returned, they are purely running on Sharia, but at the same time, because in Afghanistan we do not have codification of Sharia as such, then it leaves it open to interpretation from one person to another person. So since Taliban have returned to power, Afghanistan is entirely on a vacuum of any legal framework. So since Taliban have returned to power, they also created this atmosphere of fear, oppression, and massive human rights violations is going on. Many peaceful protests, especially run and led by women in Afghanistan, they have been violently crushed. Hundreds of women were arrested. Many of them were gang raped in the Taliban prisons. And at the same time, many others, they face severe forms of torture, including sexual exploitation or torture, I would say, like sexual violence that have been happening in Taliban's prison against women protesters who were somehow protesting against Taliban's ban on women's employment, women's education, and others. Also, I want to mention that since Taliban have returned to power, they banned girls from education beyond year 6 in school. They banned women employment in all government sectors, on all non-government sectors, except in the medical field where women doctors and nurses can still work, but only to attend women patients. They are not allowed to work in male departments. Furthermore, I also want to mention that women humanitarian workers, despite there was a lot of pressure by the Afghan themselves and also from the international community, still not many women are allowed to work in the humanitarian sector, only in very few areas, including the United Nations and some other international organizations. But for the Afghan NGOs, for Afghan organizations, women are not allowed to work in total, and only in some exceptional cases, if they are providing health and also midwives, they are allowed to work. So since Taliban have returned, there is a total absolute ban on women attending universities or high schools or other places where they can have education, but also they are banned from working. Some women who are working in the media and other places. They are not allowed to be on the media, and their voices are not allowed to be heard because last year Taliban also passed the Prevention of Vice and Promotion of Virtue law, which is criminalizing women's voices being heard by no-mahram or men that are not related to them. And also they are criminalizing women going by themselves or lonely women going by themselves to certain distances. Afghan women are not allowed to leave their homes or go to places without being accompanied by a man or also accompanied by other people. They're not allowed to go by themselves. Then the situation is very difficult for the women who are victims of violence, victims of domestic violence, the victims of sexual violence, because then in that situation, a woman have to go to a Taliban police station, a woman have to go to a Taliban ministry. But if they are not allowed to enter, how they are going to report that? So since Taliban have returned to power, the cases of domestic abuse and also suicide among women have significantly increased. In many cases, what Taliban do, they punish women who are victims of rape under the name of the zina. While these women did not commit zina, they are simply being raped by someone. But the moment the woman reports or the family members report, Taliban bring that woman to the public, they lash that woman publicly, and then they are accusing that woman of adultery. So this is also, or accusing her of zina. This is why then so many women, they do not report cases of, and also domestic violence, because in many cases, first, Taliban justify violence against women under the name of Sharia, and they say that women, the husband or the guardians can punish women and they can use violence against women, and this is in the eye of the Taliban, this is absolutely justified under the Sharia. And then what the other thing the Taliban are doing, they are also encouraging men of the family to guard women, to police on women, and if a woman is caught outside, if they are not properly dressed according to the Taliban's dress code, then those women are also, the men of the family are being punished. So somehow what Taliban have done, they have created this situation of self-policing among Afghan men who are going then and punishing their own female family members. If they don't, then the Taliban will punish the man. This is also another situation where women and girls are facing. So since Taliban have returned to power, hundreds of women have been publicly lashed across Afghanistan, and there are weekly reports by the Ministry of Prevention of Vice and Promotion of Virtue of the Taliban and also Taliban's media. The vast majority of these women, they are victims of rape rather than being adulterous or committing zina. Regards to the law and order, I would say it is really difficult to say that Taliban have maintained law and order, because before the Taliban returned, it was the Taliban that were breaking the law and order. It was the Taliban that were killing people. It was the Taliban that were conducting suicide attacks and killing innocent civilians. So even now, the situation is far from perfect. The situation is extremely violent, especially for Afghans who are standing against the Taliban's censorship and also bans that they have imposed, especially on women, working on women's education, and also men are subjected to certain forms of restrictions and dress codes. The action that Taliban is doing, it is not being seen anywhere in any Islamic countries, like countries such as Bangladesh or Pakistan or Saudi Arabia or, Egypt and other places. They allow women to have education. They allow women to work. They allow women to become for example, in Bangladesh, you had female prime ministers, you have women ministers, you have women members of the parliament. But what Taliban are doing is totally against Islam and also totally against what other Islamic countries are doing at the moment. So as a result, it affects severely the whole situation on women and girls. Yes, hijab is also compulsory on women and girls. Also, Afghan women, before even Taliban were returned, they were dressed modestly, they were covering their heads, and they were wearing very modest clothes. It was not like Afghanistan was like a Western society. Taliban do not pay any orphan or any poor families. Only they select who they can pay. In many situations, because women lost their jobs, because women lost their work, they started begging on the streets. And when Taliban arrested those women, they were taken to Taliban detention centers. And many young women beggars, they were raped by the Taliban. And there are plenty of reports about that many women beggars, they said that when they were taken by the Taliban, they were collected from the streets, they were raped Taliban detention center. So even if Taliban pay like 5,000 Afghani, they only pay to their own soldiers that were killed, to their families and to the widows of their own soldiers, but they're not paying to the other Afghan, other people. So this is one of the key facts. And the other key fact is also that Taliban, even when it comes to the humanitarian aid, more than 80% of the Afghans are still relying on international humanitarian aid, such as basic food, because they cannot afford having a food. And even in that, Taliban are intervening because, first of all, they take a big chunk of that aid for themselves to feed their soldiers, and the rest of that humanitarian aid, they intervene with the list of the recipients, and they decide who can receive that humanitarian aid. The situation of the minorities, religious minorities, such as Shias, Hazaras, or Ismailis, among others, is worse. Since Taliban returned to power, and even before they were returned to power, they were constantly attacking Hazaras and Shias religious places. They were also attacking Ismailis. Even now, under the Taliban regime, many attacks happened against Hazaras, against Shias, but at the same time, there were many forced conversion of Ismailis in Afghanistan. They were forced to convert to Hanifi Islam by the members of the Taliban, and they are under a lot of pressure. Of course, I think among the countries, like Russia have been the country that recognized the Taliban government, and also India has very good relationship. Of course, Pakistan, because Pakistan created the Taliban, they are supporting, but they have not officially recognized. Iran is in diplomatic relationship with Taliban. Qatar, USA, Taliban are a very key partner with the USA in terms of the exchange of the intelligence, and also Taliban are in good relationship with other Western countries, because Taliban were created by the United States, Taliban were created by the Pakistan, so this is how they are still serving them, and it was the United States that brought Taliban to power for the second time under the Trump and Biden administration. So since Taliban also returned to power, the United States is giving $40 million cash on weekly basis. And there are hundreds of reports about that. It's not a hidden issue, or it's not something secret. The Taliban, if you check the news that is issued by the Taliban, especially the central bank, they're talking about the $80 million cash that is given to them on weekly basis by the United States. And also there are hundreds of reports that are produced internationally by the United States Congress, by many other international and local media. But most importantly, it's important to see the Taliban sources themselves that are confirming that they have been receiving $40 million cash on weekly basis from the United States. Why they are receiving the $40 million cash? Because Taliban can carry out the agenda of the West and United States in Afghanistan and also in the region. Otherwise, why United States would pay such big amount of money to a terrorist group?